You're listening to A Strange Arrangement.
You've probably heard this before. Clair de Lune by Claude Debussy. It's a classical masterpiece. This piece can mean so much to so many people, and its sound is so recognizable. It would be almost profane to alter its immutable form in any way. Almost. Because here's the thing, as long as there's been music, there have been people changing, rearranging, and adapting that music to make more music, to find new music, and to see what new things can come of that old music. And without that long history of using music to make music, I'd be out of a job. Anyway, this brings me to our guest today, Celia Tewey, producer, photographer, musician, and visual artist who, among all of her projects, has put out an album of piano arrangements and rearrangements of songs. She also has a lot of examples on her TikTok page of rearrangements of songs in different styles, and it was this one in particular that caught my attention.
What if Clair de Lune was a funk song?
Aside from the fact that it sounds great, it was something I'd never thought of doing or even hearing before, especially with Clair de Lune. And so I reached out to her to talk about it for this episode of A Strange Arrangement.
Hi, my name is Celia Tewey. I am a classical and jazz pianist, but I also play guitar, bass, banjo, all of those. I've been playing music for 18 years, piano specifically for 18 years, and my main focus is jazz improvisation and arrangements and composing. I love doing these arrangements of classic songs with sort of like genre flipping them is what I call that. And a lot of what I do on my social media platforms is that. And so I had gotten a request a really long time ago to do something with Clair de Lune. And I really wanted to revisit that and do it as something that was completely opposite of what it actually is. I mean, this classical, beautiful, flowing piece. And I was like, what's the opposite? And I thought that funk would be like the most opposite genre possible to Clair de Lune. And so I was like, how would I turn this stereotypically classical, beautiful song into something like that? And I think I kind of just went layer by layer with it, like thinking of the roots of both of them and then at the same time. So like what I mean by that is thinking of like what's the root in funk music? It's the bass and the driving bass and that funky bass line that always happens. So I just like started with a bass line in the same chords as the intro to Clair de Lune. And then I was like, well, how would this melody to Clair de Lune fit into that bass line? And that just kind of came naturally. I tested it a few times and there were a few different rhythms that happened there. But I was able to like fit the melody within the bass line and it all kind of came together in that way. But I would say, yeah, the main driving force at the beginning was just like thinking of them at their core at the same time and being like, what can I pull from this one and what can I pull from this one to make it that blend in the middle?
Did you have anything in mind in particular when you were approaching Clair de Lune?
Yeah, I think that one is my favorite classical song that's out there. It's really special to me and really special to my mom. And I think I play it all the time and I play it I've always followed the sheet music. And so I kind of wanted to find a way to follow that sheet music, but show that I can do a little more with it and that I have a new style that's developing. I think that was one of the biggest things of this album is I really wanted to make like when I hear some of my favorite piano players, I'm able to pick out their style and I'm able to sometimes hear a piece and recognize that it's them on the radio. And I want that for myself. And so I think one of the things in this specific album is that I wanted a style to develop and I wanted to see what I could do with pieces that are already there, like Clair de Lune, and see if I can make something that's recognizable to me, but also recognizable to the original song. The original song of Clair de Lune is some of the chords aren't as fleshed out in the improvs. I mean, they go by like the 1, 3, and 5 of the chord a lot. I wanted to try and like expand the scale of all the chords and add in like funky notes and like the grace notes that sound traditionally jazzy. I really love those and I wanted to incorporate those into it. So I think adding in notes that weren't traditionally in the song of Clair de Lune really in the melody lines and just making sure that those were in it in fun ways. I knew I wanted the beginning, the part that people will recognize right off the bat. I knew I wanted my favorite part, which is that kind of that middle bridge section where everything's like expanding and flowing. And then I knew I wanted a solo because I really like adding those into my pieces. And so those were kind of the three main blocks that I have in this. So I started with that first intro bit to kind of catch people and get that driving bass line in with the root main melody of the song. I guess just like there's a rhythm change in the second part that I really like, and it took me like a while to figure out exactly how to do it. It took me a while to figure out how I wanted to do that second section. And I think the way that it kind of came to fruition is really fun, and I enjoy that part of the song the most, listening back. And then, yeah, going into that next part and then coming back to that first one with that solo and just improvising over it was really fun.
For improvising over a tune like this, do you approach it the same way you would any jazz tune, or are there like other considerations that you take into account for a jazz funk arranged classical standard?
Yeah, I definitely take into account when I sit down to solo over a jazz piece, you kind of have the melody and the head melody in your head of what it's going to sound like and maybe what you want to refer back to at certain melody lines or certain vocal lines. And I definitely did that in this. Like I wanted the melody to hit some of the notes in the Clair de Lune melody. And so I was like cautious of wanting to do that, but then I also wanted to kind of branch out in the scale. And so I think I just practiced the scale a bunch of times before I sat down to actually record it. And then I practiced the original melody a bunch of times to sit down to record it. And then I just kind of blended that in my head to see what would happen. And it took like, I think 3 takes to get the one that I actually have on the recording.
And now here's the whole arrangement. So I'm curious about something that you said earlier, which was coming from a classical background and then diving more into jazz. And as a percussionist who's done the same or trying to do the same, I found that to be kind of hard sometimes. And I'm curious if you could dive more into that process?
I mean, I had been playing classical piano since I was 5 years old. And so I learned all the rules, and that was very instilled in me. And I learned all of the traditional songs, all the Mozart and Bach, and all of those pieces when I was really young. And I think it was kind of around middle school and high school when I really started showing interest in improvisation and composing and kind of wanting to build my own chords in the songs I was doing, and my piano teacher would be like, "Wait, no, that's not what's written on the page." And so she suggested that I take some jazz piano lessons, and she suggested that I maybe try out for the jazz band in high school, and I did that, and it was really awesome. I think thinking back, that definitely took my music to the next level, and it definitely opened a lot of doors. But I do remember the transition from classical to jazz being really hard. I think in like the early stages of jazz piano and being in the jazz band, I really wasn't very good at soloing, and I wasn't good at just like going with the flow. I still had to pre-plan everything and like prepare things and practice all of my solos before I would perform them on stage. And I would still kind of follow these written rules, but I think after a few years of being in the jazz band, I stopped being able to do, or I stopped needing to do that. And I was able to kind of branch out. And now I don't plan anything. And like even the solo in Clair de Lune here was just a take of it. It's always going to be different. And that's what I really like. I mean, even with covers, all of those takes are different. When I play those songs now for anyone, they sound different than they do on the album because they are just improvisation takes based around loose notes, but it's definitely not as strict as my notes were when I was transitioning from classical to jazz.
Thanks so much, Celia. This was really cool. And I'm so glad I get to share your music with everyone. Where can people find it?
So I have all of my music is out on all streaming platforms, on Apple Music, Spotify, Amazon Music. I have 2 albums that are out right now. I have one called Brain Dance, which is sort of an ambient lo-fi synth album, really relaxing, really fun to listen to. And then I have an album called Covers of classic rock songs and classical songs. And I also am very active on TikTok. I do tutorials and I do video requests and lives. So I have my TikTok, and all of those are just under my name, Celia Tewey.
A Strange Arrangement was produced by me, Rob McCarthy. I edit and mix the show, and I wrote our theme music. Our artwork was done by Daniel Joel Newman, and you can find more of his work at danieljoelnewman.com. Special thanks to Elizabeth Stahl for notes and for that voice that you hear at the beginning of the show. And be sure to check out our website, asamusicpodcast.com, for sheet music, artist bios, and ways that you can get in touch with us.